Hello everybody, it's George from Ireland. So here I am in Victoria Gardens in the shadow of the House of Commons, and that's the Victoria Tower. But I'm here to talk about the outcome of yesterday's by-election in Southend West, which was a Conservative hold, as in the Conservative and Unionist Party had that seat before the by-election and they retain it now. So this by-election was occasioned by the murder of Sir David Amess, who was MP for that constituency since 1997. So Amess, he was stabbed to death, and there's a trial is about to commence. So I better not say anything more about it, as matters are sub judice. Don't want to prejudice it. But the fact that he was poignarded to death, I don't think is a matter of contention. Anyway, so the major parties, Labour and the Liberal Democrats, they chose not to field candidates. Of course, they would be legally entitled to contest it, but they've chosen not to. A bit like when that Labour MP was murdered in 2016 in the wake of, or during the Brexit referendum campaign. The other parties, the Tory party and the Liberal Democrats, chose not to put candidates forward. So it was a very easy Labour hold. And this one was perhaps the most decisive by-election victory of all time in Southend West, where the Conservative candidate won 86% of the vote. Now, the Tories won 59% when it was contested last time, so it was an ultra-safe Conservative seat, but that's just a staggering result. Admittedly, it's on a very poor turnout, only 24% turnout. So people who would have voted Labour and Liberal Democrat, I suspect, just didn't bother to vote at all. And even the other parties with name recognition, like the Greens, they didn't field a candidate. So Jada Franson, this anti-Islamist white nationalist activist, she stood but was humiliated yet again, and parties no one I've really heard of that they stood. So Miss Firth, this 56-year-old barrister, I think she is, she's been returned to Parliament for the very first time. So yes, it's a heartening result for the Conservatives, probably the only bit of rosy news on the horizon right now for the Tory party, given that just yesterday 4 key Downing Street staff tendered their resignations. Munira Mirza, who was Bojo's right-hand woman for about a dozen years and said to be Boris's brain, the fact that she has resigned it sends a certain signal. So a lot of them find some of his conduct disgustful, casting aspersions upon the reputation of a man of probity, that's to say Sir Keir Starmer. That's what really put them off. And that civil servant who sent that notorious email in May last year saying, let's take advantage of this clement weather, bring your own booze to Downing Street Garden after 6 p.m. I think he studiously avoided the word party, but it's unavoidable to draw the conclusion that this was a soirée, whatever gloss you put on it. Anyway, so it was no surprise that seat was retained by the incumbent party, particularly because there'd be huge sympathy because of the murder of Sir David, moreover because the two major parties weren't putting forward candidates. Now, in the 1980s, a number of Conservative MPs who were murdered by the IRA still happened to, also Unionists, that's Reverend Robert Bradford, and the other parties, they put forward candidates. I mean, I don't see why the other candidates shouldn't have put forward candidates. I suppose they know they're not going to win anything. I don't think there's anything indecent about putting forward a candidate in this case, because if Amess believed in democracy, he obviously believed you've got to have fiercely contested elections, so that wouldn't reflect any discredit on the other parties putting a candidate up. But very low turnout. By-elections tend to be low turnout. Now, one might think that because there's the media spotlight on that constituency, that would lead to higher turnout, but counterintuitively, no. In fact, that's not the case. So people may be a little bit bored with too much politics. One thing they did in the immediate aftermath of Sir David's assassination is Southend was raised to city status. It's a large town in Essex, but it's now a city, something that he campaigned for decades. He previously represented another constituency since 1992, somewhere around there. I can't remember, was it Basildon, but there were boundary adjustments which he thought made it a bit disadvantageous to him. But I thought that was not a good reason to accord Southend city status. I don't know what the criteria are, and I don't know how strong the case is. But the case is not one whit stronger or weaker in logic for the murder of Sir David Amess. But anyway, as a tribute to him, it has been granted city status, but I don't think there's going to be any rescission of this decision. So that's it, because there were 2 seats vacant. I can't remember which the other vacant seat is in the House of Commons. He was killed on the 15th of October, if memory serves. So it took quite some time for this by-election to come forward. A writ has to be moved for it, and there's another one. Well, the trial of the suspect is going to open next month. So only about 5 months after the incident. I don't think I'd say alleged incident. Something definitely happened. David Amos's autopsy would prove that, but whether this man who's been accused is, of course, entitled to the presumption of innocence, a trial shall tell. Anyway, what else can I say about the Victoria Tower? It's rather taller than the Elizabeth Tower, which is a bit more famous because that's what Big Ben is. People often erroneously call the other tower Big Ben. It's only the clock that is Big Ben. People sometimes call this the Sovereign Tower, and then you can see the Union flag hoisted. Well, it's somewhat obscured by the limbs of the tree there, but that flag is lowered and the Royal Standard raised when Her Britannic Majesty comes here for the state opening of Parliament. So it's actually not a very cold day, but because it's so humid, then it feels colder than it is. There's that chill factor. It really gets through the clothes. Anyway, so they didn't waste their time or money, the Lib Dems, or indeed Labour, by fighting that seat. So I think Southend's going to send it in Conservative hands for quite some time. Amos, he was an unusual Conservative MP in some ways, coming from a working class background, having been a primary school teacher, elected not particularly early in life. He had very strong links to the area, being in that northeast London, which is Essex, all his life, so was more or less a local boy. And he was not someone who was easy to pigeonhole. He was one of only 2 Conservative MPs to vote against hunting with hounds, the other one being Anne Widdecombe. He was a zealous Catholic, he was anti-abortion, he was married, he had 5 children, and he fervently believed in animal rights, was against cruel tethering. Now, being a kinophile, I also wouldn't want to see curs tied up, because, you know, they're almost human in my view. So he was one of a kind. He's gone a long time ago. He was made a knight bachelor for services to community through his political campaigning, but he never held high office. His most exalted position was Parliamentary Private Secretary to Michael Portillo. You've got to remember that in the mid-90s, Portillo was seen as the Conservatives' great white hope, and in 1995, some people urged him to stand against John Major. People even installed telephone lines in a certain room which was going to function as a campaign office, but he declined to do so when Major resigned as leader of the Conservative Unionist Party in a back me or sack me move. So what a high-octane moment, had some un-Majorish oomph, who was always seen as palsied and pallid, very monochromatic, so the grey man of British politics. But Amos, though he was loyal to Portillo, I'm not sure if he was one of those who pleaded with Michael Portillo, who was then the Defence Secretary, to resign from the Cabinet and challenge John Major for the leadership. In fact, John Redwood did so, but lost quite heavily. So it gave the Conservatives a brief bump in the polls, but it didn't prevent that annus horribilis in 1997. All right, so that is enough from Parliament about the Southend West by-election. So do come here to the Victoria Gardens. Obviously, it's open to the public. It's free to get in. Toodaloo, everyone.